As I struggled to lift the body, my breath quickened, my arms screamed with exhaustion, and in the crushing blackness 900 feet below, I understood I wasn't bringing anyone back. I was joining them. My name is David Shaw. I left my life behind, chasing a soul into the blackest waters on Earth. I was an Australian scuba diver, technical diver, and airline pilot for Cathay Pacific. My life was built on a foundation of control, meticulous planning, and a passion for pushing human limits. I had always been driven, always searching for the next challenge, the next record. But even a career as demanding as mine could not prepare me for the mission I took on in 2005. A mission that would not only define my legacy, but also lead to an unimaginable tragedy. Growing up in Australia, I always had an affinity for the outdoors, an unyielding desire to explore, to venture into places that others might fear. The thrill of flight as a commercial pilot was unmatched, but it was the world beneath the water that truly captivated me. The silence, the weight of the depths, the unknown challenges. It was a different kind of freedom, a kind of freedom that spoke to my soul. On October 28, 2004, I made history by breaking 4 world records in a single dive to 890 feet at Bushman Hole, South Africa, a depth few had even dreamed of attempting. The dive was demanding, requiring everything I had, both physically and mentally. But it was on that dive that I saw something that would haunt me for years to come. As I descended into the abyss, my lights caught a glimpse of something at the bottom, something lifeless. Still, it was Dion Dreyer's body. The sight stayed with me long after I surfaced, and from that moment, I knew that I had to return. His body, trapped in the cold, dark waters, needed to be brought back home. I made a promise to Dion Dreyer's family to bring Dion's body back, a promise that would soon become my obsession. I didn't just want to dive into the depths again. I needed to, for Dion, for his family, and for myself. I had seen his body before, and I couldn't shake the image. The world of deep diving is one of calculated risks and respect for the power of the ocean, but I knew that recovering a body from 890 feet, one that had been trapped in the cold, dark waters for nearly a decade, would test everything I had learned about diving, about survival, and about perseverance. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how dangerous this would be. Bushman's Hole, located in South Africa, is one of the deepest freshwater caves in the world. A place of unimaginable danger, a place where time and time again, divers have pushed the limits, only to be swallowed by the depths. This wasn't just about bringing someone back home. It was about taking on the kind of challenge that few dare to face, and fewer still would survive. The level of preparation required for a dive like this was something I had never experienced before. Every detail needed to be accounted for. It wasn't just about my own safety. It was about the safety of everyone involved. The depth was pushing the boundaries of human endurance, requiring the use of specialized equipment, specific gas mixtures, and an unwavering commitment to teamwork. Even a small mistake could lead to catastrophic consequences. I also knew that this dive would require video documentation. Not only would the footage serve as a record of the dive itself, but it would also help with any analysis if something went wrong. There was no room for error, so we would use multiple cameras, one mounted on my helmet, and others placed along the path to ensure the entire dive was recorded. Even with all the meticulous planning, no dive like this could be attempted alone. My support team would be critical. Don Shirley, a trusted and experienced diver, would be my backup, ensuring I had support in case anything went wrong. He was a seasoned diver with years of experience in technical diving, and his role was vital to the mission's success. But even with Don and the others, the risks were high. We would need to stay in constant communication, ensuring everything was going as planned, and most importantly, keeping an eye on each other's safety. The morning of January 8th, 2005, was like any other at Bushman's Hole, quiet, still, and filled with a haunting sense of anticipation. The air was thick with the weight of what we were about to attempt. As the first light of dawn broke across the landscape, we prepared for the most dangerous dive of my life. I checked my gear one last time, adjusting the rebreather and ensuring the Trimix gas was set to the correct mix. The last thing I needed was a failure in the system. I felt a mix of nervous energy and calm determination. I knew what I was doing. This wasn't my first deep dive, but it was by far the most significant. The water in Bushman's Hole was deceptively tranquil on the surface, but beneath it lay a darkness that could swallow you whole without a trace. As I descended into the mouth of the cave, I felt the cold water seep through my wetsuit. It wasn't the kind of cold that makes you shiver. It was the kind of cold that numbs you from the inside out. It wraps around your bones and makes you question why you ever chose to be here in the first place. But I had made a promise, and there was no turning back. The deeper I went, the more everything around me began to change. The cave became darker, the pressure on my body mounting. The lights from my helmet camera barely cut through the thick water. At 330 feet, the water felt heavier, the pressure more pronounced. My vision began to blur slightly, not from the darkness, but from the compression of the depths. The silence was almost suffocating. There's something eerie about the sound of your own breathing when you're alone in the deep. With each foot that passed, I descended further into a world that felt increasingly alien. The only sound that reached my ears were the soft hiss of the rebreather and the occasional tap of my equipment against the rock walls of the cave. By the time I reached 655 feet, I was truly in the abyss. The cold, the darkness, and the pressure were like a heavy weight pressing against me. But I didn't feel fear. I felt resolved. My mind was focused, my body trained for this moment. I had done this before, but the stakes had never been so high. I was now entering the zone where few men had gone before and where some had never returned. At 890 feet, the landscape of the cave opened up before me, and there it was, the lifeless body of Dion Dreyer. I had seen him before my previous dive, but now I had come to bring him home. His body was entangled in the rocks, cold and unmoving. The sight of it was haunting, yet I felt a strange sense of duty. I knew that, despite the dangers, I couldn't leave him down there. Not after everything. I approached the body carefully, my fingers numb as I began the delicate task of disentangling it. The idea was simple. Bring Dreyer's body to the surface, recover him, and give his family the closure they deserved. But as I began the process, something went terribly wrong. Just as I made my first attempt to move Dreyer's body, the silted water around me erupted. The slightest movement kicked up a cloud of sediment, turning the already dark waters into an impenetrable mess. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Panic set in, a quick rush of adrenaline. I needed to calm down. In these situations, panic can kill you faster than any underwater hazard. But the complications didn't stop there. As I tried to push forward, my line got tangled in Dreyer's body. It wasn't the way I had imagined it. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my head felt heavier with each passing second. The minutes felt like hours. I fought to free myself, but the body was tangled tighter than I had expected. In the chaos, I didn't notice the subtle warning signs from my rebreather at first. The system was starting to malfunction. The gas mix wasn't right, and the rebreather began to have trouble clearing the carbon dioxide from the air. I knew that I had only a limited amount of time before the system failed completely. I felt it before I recognized it. The disorientation, the strange feeling of euphoria that is part of the effect of narcosis. At these depths, nitrogen begins to have an intoxicating effect on the brain, dulling the senses and impairing judgment. It's like being underwater in a dream where nothing seems to matter, but everything is slipping away. As the pressure on my body intensified, I felt my thoughts begin to slow. I knew that I needed to ascend, but the deeper I went, the harder it became to think clearly, to make decisions. I knew the risks. If I stayed down too long, I could lose consciousness. But even as I realized the gravity of the situation, I couldn't seem to shake the effects of the deep. The deeper I sank, the more it became clear that I might not make out of the cave. My mind was screaming at me to ascend, but my body refused to cooperate. As I sank deeper into the blackness of Bushman's Hole, a part of me knew something was wrong. The tight grip of narcosis was clouding my judgment, and the rebreather failure made it nearly impossible to breathe comfortably. I should have ascended, but the pressure to complete my mission, to fulfill the promise I had made, was overpowering. My mind was foggy and my body was giving out, but I kept telling myself that I could push through. On the surface, Don Shirley and the support team were watching, waiting, ready to act in case something went wrong. Don was an experienced diver, and he knew the risks as well as I did. We had trained together for this moment, but the reality it was far more dangerous than any of us had anticipated. When the time came for Don to make his move, it was because he had seen the signs that something had gone terribly wrong. He attempted to descend and reach me, his role as a backup diver becoming a desperate rescue mission. But the depths of Bushman's Hole, with its cold, crushing pressure, didn't just challenge me. They challenged him too. As Don descended to try and rescue me, he too was affected by the overwhelming conditions. Don was caught in the same entangled mess of silt and uncertainty. In an attempt to reach me, he experienced a severe case of high-pressure nervous syndrome, HBNS, and his body began to shut down under the immense pressure. He had no choice but to ascend quickly, suffering permanent injuries from the dive. The surface team had to act fast. They knew something had gone horribly wrong, and the clock was ticking, but they couldn't reach us in time. Back at 890 feet, the situation was grim. I couldn't hold on much longer. My body was fighting against me. The world around me seemed to slow, the cold water pressing into my chest, and the deep, relentless pull of the depths made it harder and harder to breathe. My mind was in a fog, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to disappear into the blackness. But I never gave up, not until I couldn't hold on anymore. The rescue team on the surface couldn't get to me in time. The darkness of Bushman's Hole, the remoteness of the location, and the extreme depth made it impossible for anyone to come to my aid in time. My body remained at the bottom of the cave, lost in the cold waters, my mission unfinished. For days they searched, but I was gone. It wasn't until after several days of relentless searching that the dive team came to the painful conclusion that I had not survived the dive. I was presumed dead, my body still trapped in the abyss. The mission to recover Dreyer's remains was now overshadowed by my own tragic death. As the world began to process the news of my death, experts began analyzing what had gone wrong during the dive. There were many theories, but the most likely scenario was a combination of factors. First, the rebreather failure had compromised my air supply, leaving me with insufficient oxygen. The narcosis had clouded my judgment, impairing my ability to make sound decisions. The entanglement with Dreyer's body, coupled with the silt clouding my vision, made the already dangerous mission even more complicated. 10 days after my dive, something no one expected happened. Bushman's Hole, that cold, silent tomb, gave up what it had claimed. My body, along with Dion Dreyer's, rose from the depths, entangled together, side by side. After 10 years and one final attempt, we had both come back to the surface, not through victory, but through tragedy. It was as if the cave had finally decided to let go. The bodies, once trapped under crushing pressure, floated up in a haunting, almost poetic silence. There was no celebration, no feeling of success, just shock and sorrow. The very mission that had driven me, the one meant to bring peace to a grieving family, had ended in the same way Dion's dive had, with a life lost. When the recovery team saw our bodies, the emotion was overwhelming. They had hope for success, but not like this. Dion's parents, who had waited nearly a decade for answers, now had them, but closure came at a terrible cost. It was relief tangled with heartbreak. For my own family, it was a devastating end. They had supported me through every dive, every risk. But no amount of preparation could soften this kind of goodbye. News of our return spread fast. The story captured international attention. Headlines labeled a tragedy, a heroic mission, a cautionary tale. To some, it was the story of a man who pushed too far. To others, it was about keeping a promise no matter the cost. But for the people closest to us, it was never just a diving story. It was about grief, love, and the way to closure. The footage from my helmet camera, documenting my final moments, was never released to the public. It remained private, not just out of respect, but because it showed something too raw, too intimate. It captured every step of the descent, the effort to free Dion's body, and the fatal complications that followed. It wasn't just difficult to watch. It was a mirror reflecting the exact moment when purpose met the limits of the human body. Experts studied the footage closely. They dissected every frame, every movement. try to understand what went wrong and how to prevent it from happening again. That video, though locked away from the public eye, became a powerful learning tool in the world of technical diving. In the end, it wasn't just a record of death. It became a legacy of knowledge that might save others. Though my life ended far beneath the surface, the legacy I left behind still ripples through the technical diving world. I wasn't just chasing records, I was chasing understanding, pushing limits to see what lay beyond. My work with rebreathers and deep gas mixes helped make extreme dives safer, and I always share what I learned. But my final dive became something greater than any achievement. It became a warning. Diving isn't just about courage. It's about knowing your limits. My death forced the community to rethink safety, training, and what we're truly risking when we go deep. The ocean doesn't care how skilled you are. It demands respect. The biggest danger isn't the depth. It's the ambition that blinds us to it. Dion Dreyer's family waited nearly a decade to know what happened to their son. I wanted to bring them peace. And in the end, our bodies surfaced together, linked forever by the cave that claimed us both. It wasn't the ending they hoped for, but it was an ending. My story now lives beyond me. It reminds divers, new and experienced, that no dive, no promise, is worth your life. The depths will always be there, but you only get one chance to come back. In those final moments before I descended into Bushman's Hole, I wasn't afraid. I was calm, focused, driven by something greater than myself. I had rehearsed every step, every breath, every contingency. I knew the risks. I knew how deep I was going. But this wasn't about thrill or glory. It was about keeping a promise to Dion, to his family, to myself. People ask what goes through a diver's mind before a dive like that. For me, it was clarity, a quiet sense of purpose. I wasn't trying to become a legend. I just wanted to do something right. But the deep doesn't care about good intentions. Nature doesn't bend for meaning. What drives someone to risk everything for something that seems impossible? Obsession? Courage? Maybe. But I think it's something deeper. A need to make sense of the world, to find meaning in reaching the edge. There's a strange peace in facing the unknown, in testing your limits. And there's a humbling truth too. The deeper you go, the smaller you feel. Ambition is a double-edged sword. It drives us forward, but it can blind us too. I don't regret the dive. I don't regret trying to bring Dion home. But I hope others learn from my story, not just about diving, but about life, about knowing when to push and when to pause, about respect for nature, for limits, and for the people we love. In the end, we're all just passing through, explorers chasing light in the dark. Some journeys are measured in depth, others in memory. If I'm remembered, let it not be for how I died, but for why I dove, for a promise kept, for the pursuit of something greater than fear, for the belief that even in the darkest places, the human heart still shines.